Salman Rushdie nació en India en 1947, nació en Bombay, es un escritor y ensayista británico, autor de las renombradas novelas Hijos de la Medianoche y Los versos satánicos. Su estilo ha sido comparado con el realismo mágico latinoamericano y la mayor parte de sus obras de ficción están ambientadas en el subcontinente indio. Ha sido reconocido con diversos galardones, entre ellos el premio Booker en 2 ocasiones, el premio Hans Christian Andersen en el 2013 y el premio de literatura europea que otorga el Estado austriaco en 1992. Fue nombrado Caballero de la Orden del Imperio Británico en el 2007 y es miembro del Royal Society of Literature. Ha publicado 2 libros también en el 2007, The Golden House and Home, Vintage Minis. Su más reciente novela, o sus 2 más recientes novelas, son El Quijote en 2020 y Victory City también, y su última obra, que también trajo aquí al G Festival, que es Cuchillo. Bueno, entonces vamos a comenzar con la ronda de preguntas. Karen, ¿las tienes? ¿Tienes las preguntas? Ven. Perfecto. Entonces tenemos a Silvia Colombo. ¿La quieres hacer tú? ¿Sí? Puedes hacerla de ahí. Ok.
Hi, Mr. Rushdie. I'm Silvia from Folha de São Paulo. We met a few times before, and I was just wondering, why did you decide to fictionalize your attacker instead of talking to him or describing him or even confronting him?
Well, I thought about going to meet him. I thought about going to meet him. I'm not sure it would have been possible anyway. I mean, he was in jail. I'm not sure that his lawyers would have been willing to accept a meeting. And then I just thought, I'm not going to learn very much from meeting him because he's very unlikely to open his heart to me, you know. And so what I would get is, at best, a series of predictable remarks. And it would be better to try and imagine him, I thought. You know, so I thought I could actually get further by imagining him than by meeting him. Also, it makes him belong to me. I like that too. Now he's one of my characters.
What do you think about Donald Trump's current presidential election and the policies that are he's planning or managing to adopt?
I wondered how long it would take Donald Trump to arrive. It's the second question. It's no surprise that I'm not a supporter of the Republican Party in general and Donald Trump in particular. I think it's a very worrying time in America. You know, seems like there's a different calamity every day. And we have the prospect of 4 years of this. So, and not just America, I think internationally, the consequences of the American election will be felt around the world. You know? And I mean, I have nothing original to say. It's a very worrying time. You know? I mean, it's only been 2 weeks and it's already terrible. And we have 4 years of this. Just to say, the Democrat Party is in a kind of state of disarray right now. It has no leader. It hasn't really found its oppositional voice. And that needs to happen very quickly, because at the moment, the administration is more or less unopposed, you know, and we need to rediscover how to fight back.
In your book, Naif, you mention writers like Martin Amis, Hanif Qureshi, and Paul Auster, who were having health problems while were they writing and they were getting better. after Milan Kundera's death, how do you feel or assume this new stage of your life with friends that are no longer there?
Well, look, I'm 77 years old now. One of the things that happens is you begin to lose people. You know, that you begin to find that the generation, the people you grew up with, are kind of checking out. You know, and very frequently there are losses. People have come to the end of their lives, and it's just an inevitability. You know, one has to learn to deal with the loss. And many of my close friends are gone, you know, and it's a sadness.
Mr. Rushdie, thank you for being in Colombia. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'd like to continue with Knife, your earliest publication, to ask you something about feelings. Revenge versus forgetfulness is one of the reflections left by your book, Knife. And I would like to know, 2 years after the attack you suffered, if you have more clarity on this issue, what are your thoughts about it?
You know, I think revenge is a waste of time. It gets in the way, it occupies your emotions, it distracts you. So I have no interest in that. My interest now is just to go beyond it. You know, fortunately, I'm still here. I have work to do. I want to proceed with my life, and that's my mindset.
If you had the chance, Mr. Rushdie, to be face to face with your aggressor, what would you say to him? What would be the message to him?
You know, I actually don't have much I want to say to him. I just hope he gets locked up for a long time, so that nobody has anything to say to him. That's my remaining interest in him, is to make sure he has a really long jail sentence. Otherwise, beyond that, I have no conversation that I want to have with him.
Mr. Rushdie, how does art contributed in your case to deal with the idea of death?
I mean, it's a very good question because, of course, when you're young, you don't think that much about death. You know, you feel immortal. When you're not young, you don't feel immortal. So you have to think about it. I mean, you have to think about it a lot and find ways artistically to respond to it. You know, there's some very great stories have been written, of which, for example, the story of Tolstoy, the death of Ivan Ilyich. You know, it's one of the great stories about the end of life, and it's something I'm thinking about, how to respond to that, how to face it, you know, and what kind of stories to tell about it. You know, I think actually it's fortunate to be an artist because it is a way of responding to the thing that will happen to all of us. You know, in a way, the strange thing is that none of us knows the end of our own story. We're all incomplete. And by the moment of completion comes, we can't do anything about it because we're no longer here. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with not knowing the end of our own story, except that it will come? That's a good subject.
Hello, Mr. Rushdie. Your book took me to read one of Rachel Eliza Griffith's poems, and she said, what is memory if not a bewitching math of error and correction? And it made me think, how was the exercise of remembering everything that happened to you, and how is still today the act of remembering everything that happened? You say something about it didn't bring you joy, but at least it brought you the fact of remembering. So how was that process?
One of the strange things about memory is that it's not exact. You know, that the way in which one remembers something is very often not exactly what the record shows. So to give one example, in my memory of this attack, when I saw the person approaching me, I stood up. And that's what I wrote in the book, that I stood up. If you look at the record, I wasn't standing when he attacked me. I was still sitting down. And so memory and the record disagree. And it's always been, for me, that subject about how memory is actually a kind of fiction. How when we remember things, we reinvent them. That's always been interesting to me from the earliest writing that I've done. And in this case, it became obviously more dramatic. But that disparity between memory and truth, still exists.
So the question is, Mr. Rushdie, after all your meditations, after what happened to you, do you have any message for writers? Yes.
Around the world, it's a risky time for writers now, in many parts of the world. And yet, somehow we persevere. And that has always been the case. It's not new that writers are endangered by authoritarian regimes. And yet the work survives. One of the examples one can give is, Garcia Lorca was destroyed, killed by Franco's thugs. But the poetry of Garcia Lorca lives on, and the Falange is gone. The poet Ovid was exiled by Caesar Augustus and spent the rest of his life in exile. But the poetry of Ovid still survives, and the Roman Empire is gone. So the work survives. Writers often don't. But
Thank you, Professor Rushdie. Yesterday you were speaking about the bonding with the audiences and how the audiences save you directly in the attack. And my question is how that bonding had changed after the attack with the people that surround you, with new people. Probably you didn't know a lot of us here. You seemed very tranquilo, very quiet. And how is that bonding changed after the attack, and how the bonding to life and to people?
Well, first of all, I don't think any of you look very dangerous. So I think it's probably okay. The difference is now that when there are large public events like last night, we have to be more careful. And there has to be a security presence that perhaps a couple of years ago would not have felt necessary. So now we have to be more careful, that's it. And before I agree to do an event like with more than 1,000 people, like last night, we have to take certain precautions. And the Hay Festival has been very professional and has done it very well. And so it felt fine, It felt all right last night. But maybe the security was not visible, but it was there.
Hi, Mr. Salman. We are real glad to have you here. My question is about your literature. And in The Golden House, your book, you portray that tycoon which symbolizes corruption and unchecked power in the United States. With Donald Trump's recent re-election, how do you see American society evolving in relation to the themes you explored before in your book?
The most distressing thing is not Trump himself, but the number of people who have the same attitude, the same ideas, and it's very upsetting to realize that in the country where you live, there are so many millions of people who think in that way. So I think that the phenomenon of Trumpism, to me, is more worrying than Trump himself. because that isn't going to go away, even if the next election goes in a different direction, you know, which it might do. Let's be optimistic. But that, those tens of millions of people, you know, who think like that are not going to disappear. So what does that mean for a society to be as divided as that? You know? And I mean, that's the question. I mean, I wrote 3 consecutive novels trying to understand America, you know, and I don't know how well I did, but a society so divided is in danger, you know, and what can be done about that? I don't have the answer, but at least I have the question, you know. I mean, literature is much better at questions than answers. Politicians always have answers for everything, you know. Artists usually don't have answers, but if they're any good, they ask the right questions.
I know that you like football very much. I remember when you went to Brazil once, you went to Maracanã and watched a Botafogo game. And I would like to know if you would like to go back to Brazil and go again to a stadium, if you would feel okay, even in other stadiums around the world.
No, I mean, I had a wonderful time in the Maracanã. And yes, it was not the great game, you know, it was not the fla-flu. Yeah. But I would like to go back and watch, you know, Flamengo Fluminense. That's what I would like to see. So maybe. I also, by the way, when the World Cup was being played in Germany, a German journalist got tickets for me for the opening game, which was Brazil against Croatia. And I invited my Brazilian publisher, and he flew from Sao Paulo to Germany to go to the game with me. And thank goodness Brazil won. They only just won. It was 1-0. But it would have been tragic to fly all the way from Sao Paulo to watch Brazil lose. But fortunately, that didn't happen. So
It is the person I understand it is
Luis Schwartz, yes. Yes, he came with me. And he brought me a shirt, a Brazil shirt. So I have a number 10 Brazil shirt, which is the shirt of Pelé.
You can keep that, Mr. Rushdie. Sí, contéstame el señor Rushdie.
No, I also, by the way, once went to, in Barcelona, I went to a European Cup, as it used to be called, game with Barcelona in the time of Ronaldinho, you know, who was genius that day. And they gave me, at the end, a number 10 Barcelona shirt, but instead of saying Ronaldinho, it said Rushdie. Oh. So I have a number 10 Barcelona shirt. I gave it to my son.
Mr. Rushdie, Knife is a book about many things, and of course, it is about what happened to you in New York. But I think that it's a book about love. And I also want to say that I fell in love with you a little bit after reading your thoughts about love, about the love you feel for Elisa, the love for your 2 sons, for your friends, for your writing. And I'd like to know if it is okay if I think that it's a book about love, and what do you think about that feeling?
Well, thank you, because it's very important to me that it is a kind of love story. You know, to turn a murder story into a love story, I thought was something worth doing. You know? So instead of talking about death, you talk about life. You know? And you talk about how life overcame death in this story. And yes, the love of my wife, the love of my family, my sister, my children, you know. Love is a force, you know, and I could feel it making me stronger, you know, giving me the power to recover, to become well again. You know, so love is not just something that you see in cheap novels. It's actually a very powerful force in the world. And I wanted to show that in this story, if you like, it's a struggle between love and death. And since I'm still sitting here, I guess you could say that love won the war. You know? But it was very important to me that it was a book about love and life and beauty, as well as about danger and violence and so on.
Thank you. And hope as well.
Yes, yes.
Tenemos que cortar por la agenda del señor Rushdie. Le agradecemos profundamente que haya compartido esta conversación con nosotros. Muchas gracias a ustedes por venir. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Cartagena. Thank you for this conversation.